This video is sponsored by Incogni. Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today we'll be taking a journey through the modern-day Call of Cthulhu scenario, Inversion. Written by Alex Guillotte and Baird of Bud's RPG Review, the scenario was published in 2024 as part of the Miskatonic Repository Community Content Program, which is a lot like Dungeon Masters Guild but for Call of Cthulhu. Coming in at a staggering 214 pages, this is by far the largest single adventure module that I have ever read. I mean, this is about the size of a good-sized campaign book, but this is just a single adventure. Now, once we remove all the appendices, that drops it down to, a meager, pathetic 136 pages, which, who am I kidding? That's still monstrous. But it does offer us a whole lot. New monsters, new spells, new equipment, 11 pre-generated characters, and a lot of handouts, including 17 audio handouts that you can download and play for your players around the table. This is an incredibly elaborate scenario. The plot involves the Debunker Bunker, a popular YouTube channel that debunks weird things that they found on the internet. The player characters are a group of super patrons who have been invited down to the bunker to watch the latest debunking video get made, a weird Cold War era device known as the Inversion engine. And as you can probably guess, things don't go as expected. The adventure is more of a survival horror dungeon crawl and really focuses on each character's dark secret, meaning that this one does require a good amount of role play for your group to really get the most out of it. Now, just for the sake of full disclosure, I was sent this book by the author, Baird, who also was the one who ran me through this. I didn't run this adventure myself, and he ran us through the course of, I guess, about 12 hours, maybe 15, I can't quite remember, so 12 or 15 hours. But now that he has sent this to me and I've played it and I've had a chance to read it, which I guess also took me about 12 hours, maybe it took like 15 to play it and 12 to read it. I don't quite remember. But now that I have read this adventure, I am ready to give my thoughts, my criticisms, and my suggestions for any game masters out there wanting to run this for your own groups. And I'm Jack the NPC, Diamond Tier Patron to the Debunker Bunker, and I for one am really looking forward to seeing if this inversion engine works or not. I mean, these guys, they are all about safety, so I am sure that nothing could possibly go horribly and nightmarishly wrong. Now, one way things can go nightmarishly wrong for you is having your identity stolen. Now, thankfully, there's today's sponsor, Incogni. Right now, data brokers are collecting your information, gathering your address, date of birth, buying habits, social security number, political affiliations, really everything. Then they're selling it to marketing companies, hiring managers, identity thieves, scammers, burglars, anyone they like. And one of the big threats are people's search sites, which can easily be accessed by harassers who might not like how you drove that one day, or whatever the sticker was on the back of your car, or maybe something that you said online and decide to come after you, or potential burglars that are scoping out a good house to rob. Now, while there are laws that require data brokers to remove your information from their databases if you request it, the bad news is there are hundreds of broker companies out there, making it impossible for any one person to contact them all, let alone follow up with them all to make sure that they actually do remove it. Now, that's where Incogni comes in. You simply make an account, give them permission to act on your behalf, then sit back as they go after brokers with your information and make them remove it, and then follow up with them to make sure that they really do. And just to show you, this is my most recent report that they emailed me at the end of January. So far, they've sent requests to 570 broker companies. 526 of them have removed my information, and 47 of them will never add my information again. So to help keep your data away from scammers, identity thieves, and stalkers, while also cutting down on the number of spam and junk mail and robocalls, hit the link below and use this code SETHSCORE to get 60% off an annual plan with Incogni, and let them do the work for you. But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. So any players in the audience, please stop here. But send your game masters this way to see about running Inversion for you. But if you keep going and you spoil yourself, your shame will stalk you forever. Okay, Game Masters, let's cut this beast of an adventure open and see what we got inside, because there is 214 pages worth of stuff to cover. But first, the backstory, or at least a heavily shortened version of it for this video. In 1973, a Soviet submarine discovered an ancient Yithian device. An underground facility was repurposed to study this alien machine, or inversion engine as they called it. Now what the Soviets couldn't understand was the inversion engine was created by the great race of Yith as a means of studying the dreamlands, specifically the demiplane region that's called the Nightmare. By 1976, the Soviet scientists had completed construction and were really ready to begin testing. To access the dreamlands, the inversion engine must work through a human brain. A Dr. Ivan Petrov was volunteered as their test subject. And once activated, the machine was pulled into the Nightmare, and almost at once, Dr. Petrov encountered a nightmare creature known as a fetch, and it took the form of his childhood fear, Baba Yaga. So this Baba Yaga fetch dragged Dr. Petrov deeper into his nightmares, making him a prisoner and giving her control of the inversion engine which he was hooked up to. The engine operates through a series of energy pulses, each one pulling the facility deeper and deeper into the nightmare. But the whole nightmare region is unaffected by time, which allows Baba Yaga to move both backwards and forwards through time, which is ultimately how all the information got out and got onto the dark web. So fast forward to present day, or at least 2023 present day. Jake and Ian, a pair of YouTubers operating a channel called the Debunker Bunker, a sort of wacky, homegrown Mythbusters sort of channel, stumbled upon the inversion engine being tested on Dr. Petrov in 1976 in this old video. Scouring the dark web for more information about it, they discovered the notes on how to create this machine. They decided to build one of these machines for themselves, which they were sure was not going to work, that the whole thing was a hoax, and they could prove that it was just an elaborate prank or something that they found on the internet. Among the people that they brought in to help with all the engineering on this, and also because he understood Russian, was Anton Petrov, son of Dr. Petrov, who went missing in 1976. Anton, of course, hasn't mentioned that his father is the test subject in the video that Jake and Ian hope to debunk. The scenario opens on the day of the test. The channel has invited several of their top-tier patrons to come and witness the whole event. This is the 10 pre-generated characters, as well as Anton, who can be used as the 11th pre-generated character, but if not, he should be used as an NPC because he is going to play an important role in all of this. Finally, all of those thousands of bucks I've been sending through Patreon have finally paid off, and they have flown me down to Texas, to Area 52, and I get to live my dream of finally getting to see how a YouTube video is made. The module also gives us several other options for player characters, including a safety crew, guest experts, and undercover federal agents who are wanting to see what all of this is about. No matter who they are, each character needs to have a dark secret or deep personal regret, some trauma from their past that still haunts them to this day. Now, these personal demons will be important. Now, the back of the module gives us some tips on setting all of this up if you're not going to use the pre-generated characters by asking a set of questions, which that should give you everything you need through your players answering those questions. Now, also, one thing that the module does not explain very well, which you think it would, is that all of the guests that show up are given backpacks of Debunker Bunker merchandise. Now, they're listed on the backs of the pre-gen character sheets, and they do get referenced, especially the electronic translator, well into the adventure, like we're deep inside of it before it starts talking about these translators. But keepers need to make a point not to forget to give them this handout and describe the stuff that each of them receive at the very beginning of the adventure, especially the translate. Honestly, if I had not been run through this adventure myself and, Bud had given these and made a big deal about them, I most likely would have forgotten this part when running it until we were already well into the adventure, because yes, it is mentioned on the backs of the character sheets, but I, as a keeper, I'm not looking at the player character sheets. I'm looking at all the other stuff that I'm trying to use to run this adventure, so I would have missed that and forgotten about it till later. So it would have been really handy for the adventure to have just put somewhere in the text that the keeper is reading, simply give them handout 3 now. Sweet, a brand new Debunker Bunker shit. Can we finally get to the adventure now? I feel like all this backstory stuff has been taking forever. Almost there, I promise. The scenario opens as the characters arrive at the bunker, a remote area out in West Texas known as Area 52. Once they arrive, they meet their hosts, Jake and Ian, who give them the backstory about their discovering this video of an old Soviet experiment, finding the construction plans out on the dark web, and their plans of testing this machine out. The player characters are placed in a large storage container with a huge bulletproof glass window. Outside, Jake and Ian banter and then unveil the machine that they built. No one's activated, and to everyone's surprise, a growing sphere of blackness appears above the machine. Jake and Ian begin freaking out as it begins emitting weird sounds and the dark orb continues to grow. But before they can shut it off, a brilliant flash explodes, and with a deafening roar, almost all of the NPCs explode. The container then gets blown over and everything goes black. Now, this portion, while certainly very important for the setup of the adventure and having the players know everything that they need to know, is incredibly long. It's presented as the longest read-aloud section that I have ever seen in an adventure, which is really saying something because I've seen a lot of long ones. The audio handouts can be played for your players, covering all the red text portions of Jake and Ian's dialogue. They're very well made, but even then, it is several minutes of your players just sitting there as the game master is info dumping to them, either reading it aloud or playing this to read aloud to them. So I really do encourage that game masters just sum up a lot of this stuff, or maybe break it up a little bit so that the players get little portions where they get to role play, maybe meet each other, maybe meet some of the other NPC guests a little bit, and kind of allow your players to be involved, because the scenario opens with a large portion of the players just sitting there and watching and listening and not really getting to do much themselves. Now, one idea I suggest here is when the player characters arrive at the Debunker Bunker and they're getting to meet all of the other NPCs and the other patrons and all that stuff, mention one of those NPC's shoes, like make them really recognizable, right? Like the bright purple or maybe the silver-tipped cowboy boots or something like that. Because when Bud ran us through this, he mentioned how when everything went wrong and our characters just hit the floor of the bunker, we got knocked down by the other people panicking, right? Because when that machine blew, this energy wave went out and everybody that was standing in front of that window, everything that was above their waist just got blasted apart. So our characters, we came to and we were covered in all these steaming and severed legs. So as the player characters, right, they're digging their way out of this stuff, you could mention how one of those legs that they pull off themselves is wearing those really recognizable shoes. And that can really drive home the fact that one, that NPC that we were talking to, that really friendly person, they're now dead. And two, that very well could have been us. The adventure itself really begins as the characters come to. The shipping container bunker is now strewn with broken electronics and gore, and is inside a huge concrete room. Part of the container is fused to the concrete wall. Now, what they don't know and that they're about to discover is that they've been transported back to 1976 inside the underground Soviet facility during this entire catastrophe. Now, most of the inhabitants here, the scientists and the soldiers, are all dead, while others are insane, while others have mutated into bizarre abominations or monsters ripped out of nightmares. Klaxons are blaring, lights are flickering, the walls are cracked, everything is written in Russian. The technology feels old here, like reel-to-reel computers that are programmed with a 50-year-old Soviet programming language. The adventure is essentially one huge dungeon crawl. Now we begin on level 1, and we need to get down to level 6, where the original Inversion engine is pulling this facility and everyone inside it deeper and deeper into the nightmare realm. But along the way, they have to find out what's going on here, where they are, and there's reports and certain keys that they're going to need to locate to open up blast doors or operate various machinery. What's going on? I'll tell you what's going on, is all of this has got to be some elaborate hoax from Jake and Ian, right? Like, they told us we won this thing, and they flew us down to Texas, and we got in this big metal box, then they gassed us with some drug and knocked us out, right? And then I woke up underneath a bunch of really realistic prosthetic legs. Those things were great. I got a little bit of that fake blood in my mouth. That stuff tasted real to me, so they did a bang-up job on that. But anyway, any minute now they're going to come stepping out of the shadows with their cameras up, and they're going to tell us how this is all some elaborate prank. You hear that, guys? I'm on to yous. You can come out now. Guys? Please come out. Now, I'm not going to walk you through this entire dungeon room by room. I can't. This place is just too immense. There is a ton of crazy random stuff that's going to happen to them while they're here. There is a reason this is a 214-page module, because they put a mind-blowing amount of stuff in here, different gags and different possibilities that we could do. Now, it's for this reason that the adventure also comes in with a 24-page keeper reference booklet with a flowchart of events, timeline for both before and after the scenario scenario begins and all sorts of tips from the authors. Now there's also a separate map book with all the floor plans just nicely laid out with markers indicating important rooms of what can be found inside of them. I also recommend that keepers also put page numbers next to each of these marker tags to really speed up the referencing in-game even more, because as easy as they tried to make this book to reference, sometimes you just want to have some page numbers written around there in order to get through it a lot faster, because once again, this book is huge. As I mentioned, the engine operates in a series of pulses, and the time between them is growing shorter and shorter. Each pulse brings the facility deeper into the nightmare realm, making things stranger and more dangerous after each pulse. At the 9th pulse, the facility and everyone inside of it is lost forever, meaning that this adventure is on a timer.
We're on a time limit? Well, how are we supposed to know when one of these pulses happens? I mean... Okay. Well, that answers that. Well, 1 down. 8 more to go, I suppose.
Actually, it is a lot worse than that. The Debunker Bunker teleported in on the 4th pulse, and we've got 62 minutes until the 5th pulse occurs, and remember, we've only got 9 total. Now, the 5th pulse is when things get truly weird around here. The world mirrors, meaning that if you open a book, things inside of it are written backwards, or if you're right-handed, you're now left-handed. This is where things start getting a little bit wonky with the adventure. It brings up how things, mirror or invert, even giving the option that even on the molecular level, things like food might not just digest correctly anymore because the molecules are now all backwards. But in the description for the 8th pulse, it casually mentions how their flashlights stopped working after the 5th pulse unless the player characters popped their batteries out and loaded them all into their flashlights backwards. And now this is the only time that this little tidbit gets mentioned, which is long after the Game Master should have known about that. But at the same time, other electronics continue to work fine, like the translate device, which the characters need to read all the Russian documents that they find. And by the way, the handouts for this adventure, I can't stress enough just how great these things are. I mean, these things just look cool.
I don't think that flipping around the batteries should even be necessary at all. I mean, yeah, sure, the polarity of the electricity and all that stuff has been reversed, but so is all the circuitry and all that stuff is supposed to accept that polarity, so it should work perfectly fine. I mean, if I was to look at myself in a mirror and I was to take apart a flashlight, my reflection's flashlight, the batteries are all going to be facing the correct way, right? Even though everything in that mirror universe is working the opposite way. So I think that flipping the batteries around really just adds kind of a needless complication and confusion to what's already a very weird and confusing game, and that really just muddies things up.
Going through the facility is all sorts of horrific and weird things. One of those is fungal growths. Huge patches of these growing mushrooms are everywhere, and these little glowing spores are floating around. Now, these things are bad news if anyone is dumb enough to eat one. What's shown on the map is these splotchy purple zones, and they used as a way to sort of corral your players away from different sections where there might not be that much to find, so they don't get discouraged by trying to search room after room after room and not finding anything useful. So these growth patches can be used to help encourage them towards areas that have less growth at them to hopefully find this adventure a lot more rewarding because they can discover things in those areas. Now, along the way, they'll encounter insane soldiers and scientists, evidence of horrific deaths, dark things moving behind mirrors, fly swarms, doll hands reaching through the cracks in the walls, mutated lab animals, and nightmare manifestations. And all of this gets worse and worse, weirder and weirder the deeper they go and the more pulses that happen.
My personal favorite was the operating room. So we go stepping into this place, right? And there is this woman, or what I guess used to be a woman, just laid out on a table. And her feet are up in the stirrups, and we got a front row seat to her giving birth. And that was a sight. Anyway, this baby thing was squeezing out of her and just plops wetly onto the floor. But it ain't no baby. It's got way too many arms and legs for that. And it's got this mouth, this circular mouth with these needle-like teeth. And it starts scrambling across the floor towards us. Its umbilical cord just spooling out of its mama. Out of everything else in this entire place, that was the only thing that gave me the full-on heebs-jeebs. That was memorable.
Another thing that happens is the phones. There are a lot of telephones in this complex, and oftentimes they're going to ring. Characters picking them up might hear their loved one back home, or the people from their past and their dark secret, who might even be dead, threatening or laughing or begging for help. Or Dr. Ivan Petrov, who's been hooked up to the machine on level 6, he might call and offer some helpful advice to help the player characters get there and rescue him.
Holy crap, the telephones! One of the audio handouts that this adventure comes with is a telephone ringing. And Bud, when we were playing it, he would just giggle with glee whenever you would drop that thing on us through the virtual tabletop, and it would just keep ringing over and over again until we found that phone and either answered it or shot it. We shot a lot of phones in this adventure.
Because doors and stairs not leading to where they're supposed to is a common element that you'll find in dreams and nightmares, keepers might periodically roll either at random intervals or during periods of extreme stress for various doors and stairs to lead to unexpected places. As the pulses continue, the facility is going to begin breaking down. Cracks split the concrete, paint cracks and peels, entire rooms might crumble away into black void. Now, eventually, once they've recovered the items to unlock the doors and hopefully all the knowledge on how to do all this right, the player character should make it to the Inversion engine and confront Baba Yaga, or at least the manifestation of Baba Yaga that Dr. Petrov was terrified of as a child. Now, maybe they'll kill Baba Yaga, breaking the illusion so they can properly shut down the Inversion engine. Or maybe they'll simply kill Dr. Petrov or blow the power cables to force a shutdown. Or maybe they'll bypass Baba Yaga altogether and just brave the radioactive dead to force a reactor shutdown or full-on meltdown, which it also has its own horrible risks involved with that. Once the engine is stopped, by whichever means it was that they decided to do it, the final hurdle is getting home. Now, to do that, the player characters need to get back up to the container back on level 1. And this might be a race, as the place is just coming apart around them, and dark forces are trying to keep them here and try to pull them down to the nightmare with them. The problem here is that nothing really tells the player characters directly that they need to get back up to the bunker on level 1. We can gather from the various journals and notes the dangers of turning off the engine, but nothing in here just outright says, hey, if you find yourself sucked in from another time, you got 30 minutes to get back up to the metal box you arrived in order to get home. And there's no handouts that the players can read that basically state that. So if the players do find themselves reading some journals and learning how to shut off the machine or all about this nightmare realm, keepers, you should go ahead and pass along the information to them to your players, because that knowledge in advance might alter whatever plan it is they decide to enact. Otherwise, if you don't do that, Dr. Petrov, who's either still alive or is now trapped as a ghost inside the machine, he can inform the player characters through the telephone or through various loudspeakers or something that the player characters need to hurry and get back to the box if they want to go home. Now, if they make it back, they find themselves back at the Debunker Bunker site in Texas. Everyone is back alive, though they might be a bit banged up after the engine exploded on them. Police and ambulance arrive to tend to the injured and find out what the hell happened around here. Now, no one but the characters who survived this whole ordeal remember anything about the Soviet base, and any artifacts that they brought back with them, such as, papers or guns or whatnot, those begin decaying and crumbling away very quickly into dust in just a few minutes. Now, keepers can just leave it at that, but if you want to have a good closing stinger here, you might have the player characters notice how the shadows of all the people who died here, they don't move quite right. It's kind of like Bram Stoker's Dracula, where the shadow just kind of did its own thing, or maybe it was just, off by a fraction of a second. Furthermore, any player characters who lost more than 80% of their sanity are now nightmare infected, the seed of darkness now growing inside them. Meanwhile, the region is now corrupted, the veil between worlds thinned a little bit, so people within 300 miles experience frequent nightmares, and there's more cases of violence and stress and mental illness. The gate itself that's linking the site to 1976 Russia might remain open, though now it's deep below the ground somewhere, maybe in some tunnels under there. Federal investigators might quarantine the area off, and at some future date, the government might send a team in to deal with this nightmare gate, but that is an adventure for another day. Overall, I had a lot of fun with this adventure. It threw plenty of twists and turns at us and was very different than any Call of Cthulhu scenario that I've played before. And we barely scratched the surface with what all is possible with this. I mean, hell, this review didn't even cover things like the fact that there's a mythos god named Sequar creeping around this place. And the art is wonderful, and there's plenty of it that I showed, much of it in this video, and all the maps and the handouts and the audio handouts. It's just simply incredible how much is in this adventure, and I'm really blown away by how elaborate this is. However, that's also this adventure's biggest problem. Inversion is monstrous. Even before we get to all the supplemental books, the adventure itself, once again, is 214 pages long. I've played full campaigns with a shorter word count than Inversion. And Alex, I love the guy personally, but his signature ability is turning a 30-page adventure into a 130-page adventure. So between him and Bud, there is so many cool ideas and optional things you can add to this adventure. It's just totaled up to making this whole scenario just monstrous and something that you have to flip a lot through. It makes it not only intimidating to run. I would be intimidated to run this entire adventure, but even with all the resources to help a keeper run this scenario smoothly, it is still difficult to navigate such a large book, and that is going to be the fatal flaw for a lot of game masters that are attempting to run this or considering buying it, and then just look at the size of this thing. Either they're going to find the scenario just too big that a lot of game masters don't even want to attempt it, or if they don't come into this game as well prepared as they should be and as organized as they should be with a lot of notes and tabs in their books or whatever else it is that they need to help them along and stay organized, they are going to have a lot of difficulty running this one, and that can lead to a lot of disappointment. So I would only ever recommend this scenario for a seasoned game master to run. And I don't mean just a mature game master, which yes, a lot of the subject matter and themes in here, I definitely recommend this being a game for, 18 or older mature players, but I mean experienced and competent game masters who've run a lot of scenarios and are really good at keeping themselves organized. For novice keepers, this is an adventure that you should work up to eventually, but I wouldn't recommend this for any game masters out there who are just starting out. You can pick up Inversion at DriveThruRPG, link below. If you are an experienced game master and are looking for a really cool modern era scenario that is absolutely brimming with awesome ideas and possibilities with plenty of handouts and maps and audio handouts, I recommend giving Inversion a look.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews, RPG philosophy, just hit that subscribe button. And a huge thank you to Incogni for sponsoring this video. Make sure you hit them up in the link below for a 60% discount. Till next time, gamers, you have a great day. I should have known that the Debunker Bunker guys were going to totally screw this whole thing up, because at the very beginning, when they were doing their little banter before they turned on the Inversion engine, they mentioned how they had debunked the Spectral Crew video, which was clearly a reference to Viral, the other adventure that Bud and Alex did, and I know that that video was 100% true because I was freaking there for it. Also, weren't those two guys supposed to be from Texas? Because the voice actor that played them in the opening handout stuff, that was Scott Jost. That guy's from California. I know that because he mentions it every freaking time I've ever talked to the guy. So I guess Bud and Alex, they just don't happen to know any YouTuber/podcasters that might have been born and raised and still reside in Texas, or even have a radio, TV, film degree from the University of North Texas. Nope. No one like that comes to mind.